Hi, this is Jordan, and today is a video about men's darkness or the dark side of men. And I've been talking about this term really a lot lately, so I thought it would be vital to really clear up what I mean when I talk about men's darkness or masculine darkness and why it's such a useful and important thing to explore. In fact, I have a whole course on the topic of man's darkness. So let's clear up the terms and describe a little about what we're talking about here. So for the sake of this video, there's four different dimensions of a man's darkness. They all do different things. We work with them in different ways. So the first element of man's darkness is the classic, mysterious, and attractive kind of dark nature that a few men have that women are drawn towards. And there's a particular kind of dark charisma, which is really, really compelling, and which means that some men attract a lot of women and other men really struggle to attract women. So what is this? If we kind of think back to teenage years, there's usually a kind of bad boy at school, kind of a bad boy with a heart. And it's usually the kind of guy who's grown up in a particular household where he's seen some things and he's become a little bit disillusioned with what the parents say, with what the teachers say, of all the voices of conditioning from our society. And he starts to break the rules and actually live by his own. And I think with that kind of mentality or that kind of psychology, if the young man then embodies himself in a particular way and devises a look that's a certain way, then he can have this kind of bad boy with a heart demeanor. It's not really useful enough just to be bad. Often it's the kind of brokenness underneath the more kind of aloof, skeptical facade or skeptical posture that women seem to get really drawn in by. So any of the icons like the rebel without a cause, the old James Dean icon, encapsulates this massively. There is a real allure about that bad boy type. And when I really think about that, I think the key to it is not about being necessarily this dark and nefarious character, though that can be very, very compelling. We'll get to that in a minute. It really is about turning around to the social conditioning that we were brought up with and just saying, fuck off, fuck off, you're full of shit. I'm not going to live my life by your rules because I see the lack of integrity in your rules. And so all of us who grew up nice boys, not wanting to break with the voices of conditioning and the social norms, we keep up our facades much, much longer and more firmly than this kind of bad boy archetype. And there's just a limit to how compelling or attractive any individual can be when they're wearing a lot of social facades. So that's my take on it. If we now grow up and look at this man's allure, man's kind of darkness and mystery from a more adult perspective, I would say the quality we're looking for is depth. So a man who's been around the world, who's seen a few things, who's had some adventures, who has critically had his rite of passage adventure where he's faced hardship, torment, some of his own inner demons, he comes out embodying a certain quality of depth. And if you meet a man like that who's really lived some adventures and seen some things, maybe he's, I don't know, partied in some cities of the world that you would hope your children wouldn't ever party at, or he's been with some women. Like if you get close and intimate with some great and interesting women, then you learn some things about the human condition and your own human nature, and that forms and molds a certain depth in a person. Sometimes I call this the inner tattoo. So clearly outer tattoos, body art has an alluring and mysterious and compelling kind of dark magnetism towards it in general. The inner tattoo is obviously a man who has lived out some depth, and he emanates that. So it's not about trying to say clever things to portray that you're a man of depth. It's your experiences will add up. And the more in touch a man is to his primal impulses, to the kind of things that he would do if he was in a place and no one was around to see him. And if you could get away with anything, you could go anywhere in the world and get away with anything. What would you do? To find those primal parts, desires, wishes within yourself, and to embody them, so they're not secrets in your mind that you harbor, but they're kind of tangible in a way. That adds up to create this sense of complexity and depth. And what I do believe very strongly in is the analogy that man is like a fine wine, or man is like a whiskey. As the years go by, if he lives his true authentic life, and if he says goodbye to the forces of conditioning and lives his real depth, then he will mature in very interesting ways. So just to cap off this first quality of male darkness, Jordan Peterson did a very interesting video about the 5 archetypes from women's erotic literature which showed up most commonly. And he talks about werewolf, vampire, billionaire, surgeon, and pirate, I believe. So vampire, werewolf, billionaire, surgeon, and pirate, these are the man or the male archetypes which show up most commonly in female erotic literature. And if you look at what's common between all these archetypes, they are either extremely ruthless and sharp. So the surgeon, the billionaire, has an eye for what he wants and goes for it ruthlessly, or they're absolutely one with their impulses. So the werewolf, just the archetype of a werewolf is he knows what he's feeling, he knows what he wants, and no one can stop that force of nature. And so, you know, it might be fun to dress up with a little 10% of a pirate this or a little werewolf that. Sometimes we give a little practice of that nature for our men to embody and invite in a little bit more of an archetypal force in their way of being. But the real work consists of finding those underlying impulse and that penetrative sharpness, which are qualities of every man, every animal that is in a human man's body. We have those. Can we bring them out of the dark? Can we let them flower and bloom and be part of our presence? So that's one of the great gifts of understanding our darkness. The second type of darkness is just that whole part of ourselves that we are unaware of. So the first kind is the kind of nefarious, kind of underworldy man's darkness. This is just saying there are areas to all of us that we don't know. Our blind spots, the things that we don't know, the things that we don't know that we don't know. Perhaps these are things that other people see about us really clearly, but they remain in the dark to us, or we remain in the dark to them. The light of our awareness has not shone yet on certain aspects of our manhood and of our person, and they remain mysterious. And so it's really interesting to look at the unknown, like the darkness in us which is unknown, because that's where both so many gifts are and so many potential things that if you saw them, you would stop doing them. So if you've got this nervous twitch where every time you go on a date with a beautiful woman and the first thing you do is kind of scratch your face every time you speak, then there's just a behavioral habit of scratching yourself and then reducing the kind of certainty and conviction that you're able to portray with her. And if you saw yourself on video and saw some of your, I don't know, little shakes or giveaways or the way that you dissipate a little bit of energy, you would stop doing them. They're blind spots to you right now, but if you knew about them, you could have an instantaneous, quick change and be able to create more confidence, presence, trust in the interactions that you have. So those are simple wins. Obviously, our entire relationship habits and patterns are living in the dark spot. Carl Jung once said that if until you make the unconscious conscious, it will run your life and you will call it fate. So we want to have a look into our darkness just to see, left to my own devices, what kind of life am I going to create for myself? What kind of relationship patterns am I going to walk into again? And with the light of my awareness now shone on them, can I choose a different path and create something new? The other really important thing that nearly all men overlook and never ask about are, what are the things that are in my shadow, my unknown zone, my darkness, that are gifts? So a lot of us get on the personal development trail and we're like, okay, approach all our friends, approach all our former lovers, approach all the women that we're seeing now, and so on. And we just say, tell me the truth. How do you see me? What don't I get about myself? What are my good traits? What are my bad traits? And so on. Usually the emphasis that we have for that is, tell me all my darkness, tell me all my weak points, and I promise I'll try and improve. Like, tell me the truth. And there's such a beautiful power to a man who's willing to face his own truth and invite feedback from the world around him. But we rarely ask the more tender or vulnerable question, hey, what are my gifts? How do I touch you? What do you think are some of my greatest qualities and character traits? It's actually a bit more vulnerable to ask that. And I had this experience. This is back when I first found the power of feedback and the transformative effect that can have on someone's life. I remember being sat with 4 women, and they decided that they were going to circle around me and speak the truth that they had inside themselves about me, and that they were going to tell me all the things that they actually loved about me. And this thing went on for nearly an hour, 45, 50 minutes. One by one, these women would speak. This is where you've really impacted my life. These are the traits that I love about you. And it just added up and up. And if you've ever felt that sense of cringe when you're trying to take a compliment and it kind of gets in and it's really uncomfortable, imagine that spread out for about 45 or 50 minutes. Needless to say, within 15 or 20 minutes, I was in tears. And I think my heart opened. I fell in love with that afternoon. I was looking into some of these women's eyes and just tears rolling down my face, because I had been seen in gifts that I always thought maybe I had, but no one had ever confirmed before, or I'd been celebrated in just innocuous things that I thought were normal parts of my behavior. These women called them out and said, this is how it impacts us. This is why we love being around you. And when you come into the room, we feel more excited. And to let all of that positive affirmation come in was one of the most tremendous healing experiences I've had. It has to be said. And it doesn't require you to run off to the jungle and take some mysterious medicine. It's the power of when a group of 5, 6 people come together and just share the truths that we so commonly in our cultures withhold from one another. So you've got untapped gifts within your darkness, not just the mysterious, gritty, dark ones. Also really light, really generous, really beautiful things that probably very few people have told you about. Or if they have, you've possibly found it very difficult to take in and actually accept and own, because it's vulnerable. It's vulnerable to actually come close to feelings of self-love for many of us. So the third form of man's darkness that I'm going to talk about today is the destructive darkness. So we all have destructive forces inside of us. We all have emotions that are hard to deal with and we push away. And these can turn into all different kinds of addiction. Could be sex addiction, could be porn addiction, could be a prostitute addiction, it could be drinking, it could be drugs, it could just be Netflix and YouTube and social media, any kind of numbing. The idea of an addiction is we kind of go there automatically when stuff bubbles up inside us that we don't want to feel. And so one of the big important works of every man when contemplating his darkness is to look at what addictions he has in his life, and if he can, dive beneath those and find the root cause of them. And when you come to feel those root cause emotions, the voices in the head, the feelings in the body that drive you to an addictive pattern, that can feel very dark indeed. Like you're going into the underworld, you're going into hell's gates, and finding the disturbing stuff that really causes you a lot of tumultuous experience in life. So this is brave work, to go into the land underneath your addictions. And down there as well, in the more kind of destructive part of a man's psyche, you've got the deadly sins. So I love that model of the 7 deadly sins. Gluttony, avarice, envy, pride, judgments we have about others. There are all kinds of destructive darkness that flows through the mind on a daily basis. If we commit to becoming aware of that, we can journal about it and discover, and then dive through and inquire and find some of those emotional roots. And what I've seen time and time again is that when a man commits to finding the underlying stuff that drive either addictive behaviors or kind of deadly sin type mindsets and reactive behaviors, they cease. We no longer have to act them out so much in our relationships or within ourselves, and it brings us a lot more peace. It brings us a lot more peace. Relationships become much more effortless. So the darkness within, the destructive darkness within, is something to be looked at, not to be ran away from for much longer, because the sooner we can eliminate and soothe and heal the reasons why we do some of our darker, destructive stuff, the more we can claim that life force back. And it's kind of like however much energy you're devoting or giving away to some addictive behavior or to some negative mental pattern, that's kind of money. That's like wages, monthly wages that you're spending every single month on something that's not going to grow you. Ideally, you want to kind of cancel your Netflix, so to speak, bring back all this money, all this energy that you're frittering away, and be able to spend it in places which are more important to you. And that's going to be intimate relationship, is going to be keeping sex going in a heart-connected and beautiful way for hours. It's going to be your life purpose at the end of the day, and it's going to be the positive impact you can have on other people. And if you're running a business and your body and your energy is topped up with 90 or 100% of your natural life force, your clients are going to feel that. Your family is going to feel that. Everyone around you is going to feel that, and you're going to have enough gas in the tank to make the projects that you have in life run and end up going somewhere productive. So the fourth kind of darkness that I want to talk about is a constructive darkness. My favorite symbol of this is the classic Jesus going into the temples and turning the tables of the money changers over. He says, "This is a place of God. This is a house of God. I will not accept this kind of behavior here." So within that, you've got this constructive darkness, which is man's righteous anger, man's indignation, man's boundaries, man's tempestuous calling out of others for the sake of a higher standard. And this is an incredibly constructive darkness. So if I'm throwing over the tables and the money changers, or if I'm telling my friends this and that, or kind of becoming angry and denigrating somebody else for my own gain, you might say that's more of a destructive darkness, and that's something that could be very easily. But there's a difference that if I'm acting in a kind of selfless way, but I'm of service to the person that I'm angry with or I'm angry about, or if I'm setting a boundary that is actually of service and speaking forth a higher standard to the other people in my life. It's not just about Jordan having power over somebody else. It's about, can I speak my anger, my indignation in a way that ultimately can improve the other person and help the other person step into their higher selves. All of a sudden, we've got this phenomenal constructive darkness. Constructive, masculine, powerful energy is taking a stand. How often in your intimate life have you ever took a stand for your partner to start showing up in a way that was the greater expression of herself? For her and for the relationship. not out of a sense of bullying or putting down, but for her. And this is a kind of darkness. I'm calling this a very masculine version of darkness, because it's so rarely seen, and we have few models in our culture these days that have a really righteous and serviceful dark power. Politicians don't seem to have it. Celebrities don't seem to have it. I don't really see where we can get much of this stuff for, but if it wasn't for being able to take a stand about the kind of love and the kind of qualities and the values that I care about most, I would never be able to build a beautiful and developing, unfolding, continually improving relationship with my woman or with the different people that I work with. And I think for any of us men to be in our full power, we need this kingly, compassionate, dark, constructive energy online and in service of the people around us. It's honor. There's tremendous honor in this. So those are the 4 types. I know we can slice and dice this topic up a million ways. We've got the kind of mysterious, alluring, slightly nefarious darkness that is born of our primal instincts under the conditioning. We have got the darkness, just the unknown, the blind spots that we don't know about. We've got destructive darkness. We all have patterns that keep us a little away from owning the full force of our energy. And we have this beautiful constructive darkness that culture has very few models for. Slipped my mind to tell a story actually in the first kind of darkness. Just thinking about this kind of nefarious, mysterious depth and complexity that very few men have, but some have. I've met a few gigolos over the years actually who have really known some deep and mysterious things about women and about life. We also met, my girlfriend and I, we met in India, a man who was a tantra teacher, and he actually had gone to live in a cave for 4 years. And then that wasn't working. So he went to live in the jungle for 5 years, just as an ascetic, loincloth, bowl for food. That was about it. He went and lived in the jungle for another 5 years. And then he went to, that wasn't quite giving him the breakthrough that he wanted. So then he went to live in Varanasi, which is India's holy city. And he lived among the cremation grounds of Varanasi, doing specific special rituals that were too confidential to share with us. Me and my girlfriend looked at each other like, no shit, like imagining what a penniless and clothesless and almost egoless tantric mystic might do among the cremation grounds of Varanasi. We prodded and probed a little bit to try and find out, and we arrived with some intuitions, and we went home and discussed it. But I'm definitely not saying every man has to go out to those lengths to find the darkness of the universe and experience everything that needs to be experienced in life to be able to feel himself as whole and complete. But there is a little version of that actually, of going out and seeking. My mentor Zan says, climb a mountain and never tell a soul. There is something about venturing out into the external world so we can meet and find our mettle as men, which does something very powerful on an internal level that changes and reorganizes something inside of us. And then it's like, you sit across from that woman on the first date, even if she's beautiful and gives you butterflies, or you sit across from your partner of 5 years and you look her in the eye in the middle of an argument, and you just feel from the top of your head down to the bottom of your feet and into the earth below you. I've seen some things. Whatever you throw at me right now is okay. I'm going to be able to handle it. You, my love, cannot give me anything harder, deeper, darker, or worse than I've already faced in my life already. And because of that, you earn yourself what I'm calling here this masculine darkness, this man's sense of darkness, this grit. And you can be as loving and as sweet as you like when you found that place inside of you. That's going to take care of a lot of relationship. So I'm going to wrap up the video. Of course, everything I just said about men's darkness, women have a darkness too. Some women have a kind of nefarious, alluring, seductive nature which transcends their outer beauty. And that's a miraculous thing for us as men to start noticing and observing, like to be able to see and feel women beyond their bodies and beyond their appearances and feel what's truly feminine and alluring. Women have their unknown sides, and a lot of the fun of relationship is discovering and having her see some of her unknown places as she's doing that to us. Women, of course, have got their own destructive tendencies that they need to work through. We can help in. Hopefully, we're not going to be a white knight or a therapist to do all that work for her, but we're certainly going to meet a lot of that in relationship. And women have got their flaming goddess, constructive compassion, which a lot of the time feels to us as men as can feel a bit destructive because they're out to swipe our ego and our false fronts and our protective defenses away. But ultimately, it's in service. And just as it's a rare thing to find a man with that fiery, fierce heart alive in the world, it's also rare to find women who believe in themselves enough to let their passionate wisdom come forth and be of service to others. So we need each other in this game to bring out the best in each other and in those around us. So if you like this topic of darkness, check out my mastery program. It's an online program. We have an alumni vibrant community and also a live part of it. Just check the link. That's, of course, in tandem with the Ars Amorata, of which I'm a big part. So if this message hits you at a good time, apply now, and maybe we will do some of the nitty-gritty work on all parts of your manly darkness together soon. Thank you. Have a good day wherever you are.